The letter trembles in Frank's weathered hands as the ferry cuts through morning fog. His name is scrawled across the envelope in careful handwriting he does not recognize. Inside, just 6 words that make his blood run cold. You saved my life, thank you. He flips the note over. In the corner, a tiny doodle, a bike, drawn with the wobbly wheels and a little basket, signed simply, the girl with the red bike. He looked up, scanning the handful of early commuters clutching their coffee cups, their faces buried in phones. No one's watching him, no one smiling with recognition. The woman who handed him this letter, dark hair, kind eyes, maybe 40, she disappeared into the crowd before he could even process what was happening. Frank's mind races backward through 4 decades of ferry crossings. 40 years of the same route, the same horn, the same jokes with the same passengers. When had he saved anyone's life? He'd prevented a few drunk college kids from falling overboard, sure. Helped an elderly man who had dizzy spell, but nothing that felt like this. Then it hit him. A flash of memory so quick it's gone before he can grab it. The sound of metal clattering against the deck. A child's bicycle. Rain. Someone crying. His breath catches in his throat, but the image just slips away like water through his fingers. Frank folds the letter carefully, sliding it into his jacket pocket like evidence of a crime. His hand lingers there, as if afraid it might vanish. He grips the ferry's wheel tighter, eyes on the river, but mind far from it. Somewhere in that fog of 40 years, a single moment waits for him, one he can't remember, and one someone else has never forgotten. When the smallest act can ripple for decades, what would you do? Share your answer below, and subscribe for more stories that remind us how much one choice matters. The Hudson River Ferry doesn't look like much, just a steel workhorse with salt-stained paint that carried commuters between Beacon and Newburgh since the Carter administration. And Frank Morrison had been its captain for nearly every single one of those crossings. At 62, Frank moves with the easy rhythm of a man who knows every creak of his vessel. Same whistle at 6 a.m. sharp, same nod to Jimmy, the dock hand who's been loading cars for 20 years. Same terrible dad jokes that make the regular commuters roll their eyes and secretly smile. "Morning, Captain," calls Rebecca, the nurse who takes the 7:15 every Tuesday and Thursday. "River's looking moody today," she adds, tugging her coat tighter. Frank glances at the choppy water, reads it like a favorite book. "She's just tired, aren't we all?" It's the kind of exchange that happens 1,000 times on ferries across the country. Small, forgettable moments between strangers who aren't quite strangers anymore. Frank has always been content with that, the quiet satisfaction of getting people where they need to go. His daughter Leia often teases him about it. 40 years, Dad? You ever do anything exciting out there? It's just a ferry, he always tells her with a laugh. I get them across the river, that's all. As Frank guides the boat through its familiar path, his eyes drift across the deck. For the first time in years, the routine feels off-kilter, though he can't put his fingers on why. The steadiness he once trusted now carries a faint unease, like a note out of tune. The letter in his pocket presses against his chest, heavy as stone. He pulls it out once more, rereads those 6 words, then slips it back before Leia can notice when she boards later for her hospital shift. He tells himself it's nothing, but the unease lingers. But buried mysteries have a way of blowing back to the surface. For 3 days, Frank tried to shove the letter from his mind. He clung to routine like a prayer. Coffee at 5:30, boat inspection at 5:45, first crossing at 6. The whistle still blew. The car still rolled aboard. The commuter still nodded, but the rhythm no longer suited him. Every task felt heavier, like unseen hands were piling sandbags on his shoulders. Passengers noticed first. Mrs. Cohen, 15 years a regular, squinted at him. "You all right, Captain? You look pale." "Fine," Frank muttered, tugging his cap. Even Jimmy noticed, at lunch, chewing sandwiches in the diesel-scented air. He leaned closer. "What's eating you, Captain? You've been jumpy as a cat on a hot roof." Frank almost told him, almost, but the words burned like smoke in his throat. How do you explain that someone calls you a hero for something you don't even remember? "Just tired," he said instead. Jimmy grunted, unconvinced. By Thursday, Frank couldn't stand it. The letter weighed too much in his pocket. As the last cars rolled off, he caught Jimmy by the arm. "You've been here 20 years. You remember things, right? Passengers who stood out?" Jimmy stretched his beard. "Sure, why?" Frank's throat went dry. "There was a girl with a bike. A long time ago. Did I help her?" Jimmy rubbed his jaw, thinking. Could be. Kids with bikes were always cutting it close back then. "I remember one girl in particular. Tiny thing. Red bike way too big for her. Came tearing down the dock like she was racing the devil. You held the boat more than once for kids like that." Frank's pulse hammered. "What happened to her?" Jimmy shrugged. "Hard to say. After a while, faces just stopped showing up. Must have been 20, 25 years back. Why? Is she someone important?" But Frank didn't answer, because suddenly he wasn't on the dock. He was there. Rain is pelting in the deck, a small figure in a yellow slicker, white knuckles on the handlebars, his own hand slamming the horn, gulls scattering into the storm, passengers muttering, checking their watches, the scrape of metal as the bike slammed against the railing, shoes slipping, a sharp cry cutting through the storm, then nothing. The memory dissolved, jagged, incomplete. Frank gripped the ferry's railing, dizzy. Why did it feel so important? What had happened that night? The unease spread cold through his veins. Had he endangered everyone waiting for her? Had he made a mistake so large he buried it, or worse, chose to forget? What if the letter wasn't gratitude? What if it was a warning or an accusation? Frank stared at the rushing water and whispered, "What did I do?" The river, as always, kept its secrets. That night, unable to sleep, Frank dragged out an old box. It smelled of mildew and river damp. Inside, brittle photo albums, edged curled, Polaroids of the early years. Frank leaner, Jimmy dark-haired, passengers waving from the deck, colleagues long since gone. Frank wasn't looking for himself, he was looking for her. The girl with the bike, but she wasn't there, not once, as if she had never existed. He lingered on one photo, commuters huddled under umbrellas, puddles shining on the dock, and in the corner, almost hidden, a blur of yellow. Coat? Rain slicker, just a bad lighting. He squinted until his eyes stung, but the harder he looked, the less certain he became. He snapped at the album shut, heart pounding. The letter lay on the table, those 6 words etched into his mind. "You saved my life. Thank you." His fingers traced the ink. What if it wasn't thanks at all? What if it were a reminder of an unpaid debt? The clock ticked past midnight. Frank sat in the silence, haunted by a ghost he wasn't sure was real. But one thing he knew, ghosts always come back, and this one was already on its way. The woman boards the Friday morning crossing like she's done it 1,000 times before, but Frank recognizes her instantly. Same dark hair, though shorter now. Same careful way of moving, as if she's afraid of taking up too much space. She pays her fare without making eye contact, finds a seat near the back, and pulls out a worn paperback book. Frank's hands shake on the wheel. This is her, the woman who gave him the letter. For 20 minutes, he debates with himself. Leave it alone. The rational part of his mind argues. She clearly doesn't want to talk, or she wouldn't have just handed you a note and disappeared. But the letter in his pocket feels like it's on fire, and the fragments of memory, rain, tears, a red bicycle, won't stop circling his thoughts like vultures. As the ferry approaches the Newburgh dock, Frank makes a decision that surprises even himself. He hands the controls to his relief captain and walks back through the passenger area. She looks up as the shadows falls across her book. Up close, he can see the lines around her eyes, the way she grips the paperback a little too tightly. For a moment, her shoulders stiffen. She glances towards the exit, like she might get up and vanish into the crowd the second the round drops. Frank's pulse kicks. If she leaves now, he may never know. Then, almost reluctantly, she closes the book. "Excuse me." Frank's voice came out rougher than intended. Did you give me a letter this week?" Her brown eyes widen, and for a moment, he thinks she might deny it. Instead, she nods. "Maya Santillan," she says quietly. "I wasn't sure you'd remember." That's just it. Frank sits down across from her, ignoring the curious glances of the other passengers. "I don't remember. The letter says I saved your life, but I can't. I need to know what happened." Maya's face crumples just slightly before she composes herself. "You really don't remember?" "I get pieces, a red bike, rain, but nothing is clear." Frank's voice is almost pleading now. "Please, what did I do?" Maya takes a shaky breath. "It was October 23rd, 1998. I was 13 years old." The date hits Frank like a physical blow. Suddenly, he's there, completely there, transported back 27 years to a night that had somehow been locked away in the deepest corner of his mind. It's past sunset, rain coming down in sheets. Frank should have made the last crossing 20 minutes ago, but the storm has got passengers away. He's about to signal Jimmy to bring in the ramps when he hears it. The sound of bicycle tires on wet pavement, coming fast. A figure emerges from the rain like something out of a nightmare. A small girl, soaked to the bone, wrestling with a bike that's clearly too big for her. She got a plastic garbage bag latched to her chest, and she is crying. Not the frustrated tears of a kid caught in the rain, but the deep, desperate sobs of someone whose world is ending. Frank freezes. Schedules are rules. Rules keep people safe. But rules don't hold back the tide, and they don't quiet the kind of crying that gets under your skin. Sometimes, waiting is the only thing that matters. "Please," she gasps as she reaches the dock. "Please don't leave me here." Frank should have said no. The schedule is sacred on the river, insurance regulations, Coast Guard requirements, a dozen good reasons why he can't hold the boat for one kid with a bike. But something in her voice stops him cold. "Jimmy," he calls out, "help her get that bike on board." The memory sharpens now, more vivid than a photograph. He remembers the squeal of rubber skidding on slick boards, the thunk of metal as the bike's frame smacked the railing, the garbage bag splitting open so papers fluttered across the wet deck. He remembers the rain dripping into his collar, the weight of responsibility pressing heavier than the storm. Her face, drenched, panicked, teeth chattering, was the face of someone who'd already been abandoned too many times. "Foster papers," Maya says now, watching recognition dawn on Frank's face. I was supposed to be at my new placement by 7. The family that was fostering me had already called twice, and I was sure they'd changed their minds. I thought, I thought I'd been thrown away again. Frank remembers now the way she'd stood on the deck during that crossing, shivering in her soaked clothes, how he'd given her his coffee, hot and black, terrible for a kid, but it was all he had. The way she thanked him in a voice so small it barely carried over the engine noise. I'd been in 7 foster homes in 3 years, Maya continues. Every time someone gave up on me, I told myself it didn't matter. But that night, pedaling through the storm, I realized I was lying. I was so tired of being the kid nobody wanted to keep. The bike was stolen, wasn't it? Frank asked quietly. Maya nods. From the group home, I couldn't miss another placement. I couldn't be the kid who didn't show up. She looks directly at him now. You could have left. You were supposed to leave, but you waited. Frank's throat feels tight. It was the right thing to do. No, Maya says firmly. It was everything. You didn't just carry me across the river that night, Captain Morrison. You carried me through the worst moment of my life. For the first time in years, someone had seen me coming and chosen not to leave. The ferry reaches the dock, but neither of them moves. Frank stares at this woman, this successful, confident woman who'd once been a terrified 13 years old with a stolen bike and a bag full of papers, and tries to process the magnitude of what she's been telling him. I stayed, Maya says simply, with that family. For the first time, I let myself believe that maybe I was worth waiting for because you waited. Words about Maya's letter had somehow gotten out, not the details, but enough. When Frank arrives at the terminal on his final day, there's a crowd waiting, not just co-workers in Port Authority suits, but passengers, dozens of them, lining in the dock like they're seeing off a celebrity. Frank recognizes faces from 40 years of crossings. Mrs. Cohen is here, holding a handmade sign that reads, "Thank you, Captain Frank." The college kids who used to ride hungover on Sunday mornings are now adults with kids of their own. Even some faces he doesn't immediately place, but who clearly remember him. What the hell is all of this? Frank mutters to Jimmy. Maya Santillan. Jimmy grins. Turns out she's some kind of social worker now. Runs programs for foster kids. She put out words about your retirement, and people started calling. People you probably don't even remember helping. As if summoned by her name, Maya appears at Frank's elbow. Today, she's not the nervous passenger from the ferry. She's poised, professional, carrying herself like someone accustomed to speaking in front of crowds. Ready for this? She asks. Not even a little bit. But Maya's already moving to the front of the crowd, gesturing for quiet. Most of you know Captain Morrison as the guy who gets you across the river safely. Some of you know him as the captain who tells terrible jokes at 6 in the morning. Scattered laughter from the crowd. But I know him as the man who taught me that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is just not leave. She tells the story, not all of it, but enough. The storm, the bike, the decision to wait for one scared kid when he could have followed the rules and gone home. After that night, I stayed in foster care until I aged out. But more importantly, I stayed in school. I stayed hopeful. I stayed believing that I mattered. Maya's voice catches slightly. 25 years later, I've helped place over 300 kids in permanent homes. Every single one of them benefits from a lesson I learned on a ferry in 1998, that someone cared enough not to leave me behind. The crowd is silent now. Frank feels his daughter, Leia, squeezes his arm and sees tears streaming down her face. But here's the thing, Maya continues. Captain Morrison doesn't remember saving my life. When I gave him my letter last week, he had no idea what I was talking about. Because to him, it wasn't heroic. It was just Tuesday night on a ferry, just doing what felt right. She turns to face Frank directly. Sir, you've been doing what feels right for 4 decades, and you have no idea how many lives you've changed. One by one, passengers stepped forward. The businessman Frank once helped when his car stalled. It was for a life-changing job interview. The elderly woman he called an ambulance for during chest pain. Those extra minutes mattered. Moments Frank had long forgotten, yet they meant everything to someone else. Each story layers on the last. Frank feels the air thicken, almost reverent. It's not applause but memory, and he sees himself through their eyes, a mirror of who he is and who he's been. He hears ropes splashing, the ferry gate clang, and pictures a lone mitten, soaked and left behind, ordinary, forgettable. Yet maybe someone's hope had clung to those small acts. By the time the crowd disperses, Frank is overwhelmed. These aren't dramatic rescues or death-defying heroics. They're just moments, decisions to care when it would have been easier not to. Choices to see people instead of just passengers. Leia walks him back to the ferry for one final crossing, a ceremonial run with no passengers, just Frank and the river he's called home for 4 decades. So, she says as she stands on the deck, watching the sunset over the Hudson. 40 years wasted. Frank pulls Maya's letter from his pocket, reads it one more time, then he looks at his daughter. For the first time in his life, his ordinary career feels anything but ordinary. 40 years of showing up, he says quietly. Turns out that's enough. 3 weeks into retirement, Frank discovers that sleeping past 5:30 a.m. is impossible when you've been getting up at that time for 40 years. The alarm clock may be gone, but his body doesn't care, so he takes walks instead, down to the dock, down to the same stretch of river that has been both his compass and his gauge. Most mornings, he finds Captain Rodriguez already there, a young woman not yet 30, sharp-eyed, steady-handed, the kind of person Frank can tell was born for the wheelhouse. She moves across the deck with quiet authority, checking ropes and lights, clipboards tucked under one arm. Watching her is like seeing his younger self projected forward in time, except she'll face her own storms, her own choices. She doesn't need him, and that's both comforting and strange. This morning, Leia walks beside him. She's been doing that lately, dropping by unannounced, insisting on coffee, checking to see if the silence of retirement hasn't swallowed him whole. Frank doesn't say it out loud, but he's grateful. Sometimes, the quiet feels heavier than he expected. They stand together on the dock as the first ferry of the day churns through the morning mists. The horn sounds, two sharp blasts that echo against the hills. And Frank feels a tug so deep it's almost physical. His fingers twitch like they want to curl around the wheel. His shoulders brace for vibrations of the engine. Muscle memory doesn't vanish with a gold watch and a farewell gate. Leia breaks the silence. Any regrets? Frank considers this. A month ago, he might have said yes. He might have confessed that 40 years on one stretch of river felt small compared to the lives he saw passengers chasing. He might have admitted that he feared being forgotten the moment he stepped off the deck. Now, he thinks of Maya's letter, still taped to the fridge with a ferry boat magnet his daughter made. Beside it, Leia's old photo, pigtails, missing teeth, smiling like safety was guaranteed. Reminders that the smallest choices, an extra minute, a kind word, a decision to stay, can become someone else's anchor. He remembers the story from his retirement party, the businessman who caught his interview, the woman he saved with a call, the nameless commuters who carried his quiet kindness forward. Nothing dramatic, no headlines, just small acts stacked over years into something bigger than he imagined. No regrets, Frank says at last. But I think I misunderstood the job. Leah tilts her head. How so? I thought I was just running a ferry. Turns out I was in the business of not leaving people behind. Leah smiles, but there's something thoughtful in her eyes. That's not a bad business to be in. She slips her arm through his, grounding him. Maybe that's something I could learn from you. The ferry finishes its crossing and turns back into the mist. Its light shimmer across the water before fading. And for a moment, Frank feels the ache of both endings and continuations. This river will run with or without him. These crossings will carry strangers whose names he'll never know, but some part of him will always be out there, waiting, watching, choosing not to leave. Dad, Leah's voice softened. What Maya said at the party about heroism just being not leaving. Do you really believe that? Frank watches a gull tilt its wings and ride the wind, effortless and sure. He thinks of a 13-year-old Maya in her yellow raincoat, of passengers who never realized their captain saw them, of 4 decades where showing off was his only promise. I believe, he says, that heroism isn't always remembered. Sometimes it's just making sure the boat doesn't leave too soon. The sun climbs higher, painting the Hudson in molten gold. The ferry disappears around the bend, carrying its cargo of coffee drinkers, dreamers, the weary, and the hopeful people heading towards jobs, losses, and new beginnings. Ordinary lives depend on something as simple and as profound as a boat running on time. Frank Morrison, former ferry captain, retired hero, ordinary man, turns away from the dock. His steps are slow but steady. Leah beside him, the river at its back. Whatever comes next will be quieter, smaller, but no less important. Behind him, the water keeps flowing, the ferry horn sounds again, and the boat, as always, keeps running on time. Everyday heroes are all around us.